Objective 6. Find proportions. Definition. In statistics, a proportion is a fraction of the whole. It can also be written as a decimal number. Now, if we let A over B be the proportion of the whole that has a certain characteristic, then the proportion of the whole that does not have the characteristic is 1 minus A over B. So, for example, in a statistics class, 3/5 of students are female. What proportion of students are male? Well, 1 is going to represent the whole, and we want to subtract 3/5 of the students who are female. So we're going to take 1 minus 3/5. But since the denominator is 5, we can rewrite 1 to be 5 over 5 and then subtract 3/5. So 5 over 5 minus 3/5 gives us 2/5. And that means we have 2/5 of the students are male. Another example, the proportion of Facebook users who are Asian is 9 over 25. What proportion of Facebook users are not Asian? So we're going to take 1 as a whole and subtract 9 over 25. Well, the denominator in this fraction is 25, so we can rewrite 1 to be 25 over 25 minus 9 over 25, which is equal to 16 over 25. And that means that we have 16 over 25 Facebook users who are not Asian. Another example, in an anthropology class, the total class points is based off of homework, quizzes, exams, and the final exam. If homework counts as 1/10 of the grade and exams count as 3/5 of the grade, what proportion of the total class points will come from quizzes and the final exam? Well, we're going to take 1 as a whole, and we're going to subtract the fraction for homework, and then we're going to subtract the fraction for exams since that's what's given. So we're going to take 1 minus 1/10 minus 3/5. Well, since we have two fractions that have a denominator of 10 and 5, we're going to find a common denominator between 5 and 10, which is 10. So the 1 whole can be written as 10 over 10 minus 1 over 10, and then 3/5 to be written as a denominator of 10 would be 6 over 10. So we're going to take 10 minus 1, which is 9, minus 6, which is equal to 3 over 10. So 3/10 of the class points will come from quizzes and the final exam. Now, another example, it says the proportion of a disk that is orange is 1/5, and the proportion of a disk that is blue is 1/4. What proportion of the disk is not orange or blue? Well, again, 1 is the whole. We're going to subtract orange, and the fraction for orange is 1/5. And then we're going to subtract blue, and the fraction for blue is 1/4. So what is the common denominator between 5 and 4? Well, it is 20. So the whole 1 can be written as 20 over 20, minus 1/5 is the same thing as 4 over 25, and 1/4 is the same thing as 5 over 20. So 20 minus 4 is 16, minus 5 is 11. So 11 over 20 is not orange or blue. Now keep in mind that all of these fractions can be written as a decimal or as a percent. So let's take a look at the first fraction, which is 2/5. If I take 2 divided by 5, that is the same thing as 0.4. That is the decimal. If we want to know that as a percent, we would multiply that by 100, and that would give us 40%. Likewise, 16 over 25. Let's go ahead and write that as a decimal. So 16 divided by 25 gives us a decimal of 0.64. If we want to write that as a percentage, we would say times 100, and that means that 64% of Facebook users are not Asian. Let's take a look at the next example. We have 3/10 as our answer. So 3 divided by 10 gives us 0.3. Now, that is the decimal equivalent. Now, if we write that as a percent, let's multiply that by 100, and that would give us 30%. So that means 30% of the class points will come from quizzes and the final exam. And then the last example, in this page, we have 11 over 20, which is not orange or blue. So let's go ahead and find out what that decimal is. So 11 over 20 is 0.55. So that means if we multiply that by 100, that means that 55% of the disk is not orange or blue. In this example, it says in 2012, there was a shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. 1 week later, 1,048 adults were asked how closely they had been following the news about the shootings. The findings are summarized in the table below. So here's the title, How Closely Following the News. We have the number of people. We have the first column says very closely. The next column is somewhat closely, not too closely, not at all, no opinion, and then total. So in this first question, it says find the proportion of those surveyed that followed the news somewhat closely. So if we take a look at the somewhat closely, we can see that the number that's given here is 384. And then we need to compare it to the total. So we take 384 and divide it by 1,048, and that gives us approximately 0.37. Now, if we wanted to write that as a percent, just like we did previously, if we multiply that by 100, we would get that 37%. And B, it says find the proportion of those surveyed that did not follow the news somewhat closely. Well, in order to find that, we know that the amount that did not follow the news somewhat closely would be what number? Well, we would need to take the total, which is 1,048, and then subtract the 384 to find out that did not follow the somewhat closely. So if we take the 1,048 and subtract the 384, then we get a total of 664. And now that number we need to divide by 1,048, which gives us 0.63. Now if we write that as a percentage, it'd be 63%. Now I want you to look at A and B. If we add those two together, that would give us a full 100%. And then for part C, it says find the proportion of those surveyed that followed the news not at all or not too closely. So if we look at not at all, we can see here that we got a number of 21. Okay, and then we want to find out also the numbers that are not too closely, and that is 104. So we're going to add those together because it says or, so 21 plus 104 is equal to 125. 125 divided by 1,048 gives us approximately 0.12, or if you want to write that as a percent, it would be 12%.